So, who else suspects that this guy might be an attorney?
All right, shalom. So part two. So basically, what I'm saying is that you're trying to unlawfully detain somebody, which every state has a law that's going to reflect that, right? Then you have in New York State, it's Penal Code 135.60 involves 65 that deals with coercion in the third and first degree, right? Because if you're trying to compel somebody and you're threatening them to be compliant, right? That's coercion. That's intimidation and everything else. That's, again, Title 18, Section 241 as well. You're using force to intimidate people to do something against their will, right? You're violating their rights without due process, right? You can't utilize lower level laws to supersede your constitutional oath because the Constitution supersedes any and all laws, right? That's the whole point of the constitutions is to limit the government, not the people. You're limited by the Constitution, no different than I'm limited by my biblical obligations, right? So, me, on a biblical scheme, I have to be strictly adherent exclusively to the Ten Commandments, right? And I have to apply the Ten Commandments indiscriminately to anybody and everybody, regardless of heredity and skin tone and everything else. Because, again, we don't live in a democracy, we live in a constitutional republic where the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution are modeled after the Ten Commandments, right? They thought that this was the promised land and everything else, which it was, right? The whole purpose behind the foundation of our country, that's why you have a lot of in education systems and way they attack WASPs, in other words, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Now they're calling them white nationals and everything else, trying to attack and mitigate the oath of office of the public servants. They're usurping power, right? We don't live in a democracy, right? Going back with history and everything else. Yeah, George Washington, Freemason slave owner. Benjamin Franklin, Freemason slave owner. Benjamin Franklin was affiliated with the Hellfire Club out of Ireland, where their motto was "Do as thou wilt." Perform satanic rituals underneath the church and understand church above them was just equally satanic. Freemasons support the Democrats and support the KKK and instilled Jim Crow laws. Yeshua was a Jew that proclaimed salvation is of the Jews, per John 4:22, with Romans 2 clarifying that Judaism won by heredity, but by obedience to the tribe, which is the Ten Commandments, which the Ashkenazi Jews are more tied with the Freemasons than they are actually Jews, because they're not actually Jews. Ashkenaz stems off the line of Japheth, not Shem. That's why it's called anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic is anti-Shemitic because it's against Shem's lineage. That's where the Israelites stem off. Shem went to Asia, Ham went to Africa, and Japheth went to Europe. That's why they're called European Jews, right? That's why you had people like Joe Biden, that's a Zionist Jew in which is satanic in principle, because I can go up against him and I call him a dirty Jew, because dirty means he's not adherent to the Torah, and the same applies to the Ashkenazi Jews. They don't follow the Torah. Torah is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, right? And 1,700 years ago, Emperor Constantine changed the Sabbath to Sunday, a literal day to worship the sun, which breaks two of the Ten Commandments in process: no other gods before me, as well as the weekly Sabbath, right? So what authority do you have over the church? I have supreme sovereignty. You are my servants. I can fire you, right? Going again with New York State penal codes and way, and every respective state has a similar code. And accordance to this, you have official misconduct, grounds for impeachment to which even the governor can't pardon in each respective state. New York State, that's Penal Code 195.00. To attack me based on my religious principles is a hate crime under 485.05 handled by the state police. You can watch my police interaction videos where I actually called the state trooper mentally retarded with the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office refused to obey my lawful command to arrest him because he was coercing me and what have you, unlawful detention, telling me that I should handle it in court and what have you, but it's his obligation because he's now complicit with a conspiracy against my rights on the road, because the road is public access, right? That's a Fourth Amendment violation of illegal searches and seizures. They didn't have a warrant for my arrest and what have you. Now they want to unlawfully detain me again in court. And again, going back with the previous court cases and what have you, I win because you don't have jurisdiction. You don't have personal nor subject matter jurisdiction over the church, nor do you have any of that on a private citizen, right? So if we're not causing injury or harm to any other person or property, you have no authority over us. It's that simple. That's the legal precedence. That's all the codes. Not all of them, because when their rights are asserted with the public servants, if they wanted disobey their oath of office, in other words, not honor it and not be compliant with it, break their oath of office, that's official misconduct. Depriving the citizens of their benefits, their rights, in other words, for their own benefit. You can't do that, right? So when it comes to compelling witnesses and what have you, for any case that's substantiated in law, that they have to be compensated for their time. So the same applies again, not only with the Bivens action, if they're still applicable, but also, again, Title 42, Section 1983, as well as 1985. You're violating the rights of the people under the color of law, and that's a suable offense. You could be sued not only in your professional capacity, because, again, you don't have any immunity. The people have the immunity. And we're violating the rights of the people. You lose any qualified immunity you perceive that yourself to have, because you don't have any implied consent, right? If we validate that you're not adhering to your oath of office, right? That means you're incompetent. You shouldn't be in your position. That's a violation of the 14th Amendment as well, equal protection under the law. Then you have all the respective rights under each constitution of every respective state, where every state's constitution amplifies the very principle that the federal constitution supersedes the state constitution, right? Doesn't matter what the governors think and feel and what have you, because, again, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic, right? And we can disbar any and all of you very easily. But most people don't know how to do that. And that's the other objective, right? Because if you want to act like, oh, I have a law degree. Well, there's writ of mandamus, writ of habeas corpus, quo warranto. We can revoke city charters and what have you, right? Because we have that supreme sovereignty. So if you want to act like a dictator because you have a law degree and what have you, then go for it. You won't have a law degree for that long, because I'm teaching people what the truth is, right? On a biblical scheme. So if you're dealing with well, evolution theory and Big Bang theory, that's also Freemason dogma and propaganda. I went to college for engineering. I can debunk both of them, and I've done it a number of times, right? Because it's Freemason dogma and propaganda. Charles Darwin may have been a Freemason himself, but his dad and his grandfather definitely were. And his grandfather's the one that taught him those satanic principles. It's not based in actual science. It's based on ignorant rhetoric. To try to do a 180 on the Bible to justify people acting like animals and catering to their carnal desires, right? They're called civil rights for a reason, because it keeps everything civil, right? So that's the whole purpose of the United States Constitution, right? We live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy. So the thoughts or the theologies of the judges and lawyers and what have you, especially when it comes to hate crimes, right? Tagging anybody on their religious principles. And bottom line is, it's also likewise a violation of the First Amendment of freedom from establishment. Common law principles. Common law wasn't abolished with the United States Constitution. The common law charge of committing blasphemy was eliminated with the First Amendment, freedom from establishment. However, you can't force the church to commit blasphemy, and you can't force anybody to do something against their will, right? Establish a religion with them, right? Again, going back with the laws of nations and what have you, to where the founding fathers read through it and what have you, and understood the principle that deities and what have you were used to maintain law and order. But again, Christianity hasn't been Christianity for the last 1,700 years. It's been under the control of a secular government. So Catholicism isn't truly Christian. Ashkenazi Jews aren't actually Jews, right? 613 mitzvah don't apply. They're not actually Jews. Yeshua, again, was a Jew that proclaimed salvation is of the Jews, and he was the way, the truth, and the light. No man shall come to the Father but by him. So you're suicidal in aspect, right? Because when it comes to treason under Title 18, Section 2381, that's life imprisonment or the death penalty. Any public servant, lawyer or otherwise, that witnesses that act of treason and refuses to report to the president, what have you, is in violation of misprision of treason under 2382, right? And rebellion or insurrection under 2383, which throws away posse comitatus, because the military can be deployed to quell your rebellion, Shalom.